Welcome to another episode of Tales from the Tables with your host, Rob Bradley,
John Charles Ciccarelli,
James Burrows,
and Damien Hallwood.
Hello and welcome to episode 56 of Tales from the Table. This week I am joined by JC, as usual, and our special guest, Chris Hygge. Hello, Chris.
Thank you.
Hello, welcome everybody. Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to say hi, everybody. Welcome. Oh my God, we're so excited. This is official.
So sharp.
Oh my God, like James, are you like excited to be back? We've missed you.
I'm so excited.
Yes, we got him. We were joking right before recording, dear listeners, with those kinds of Valley Girl voices. And sure enough, James can't unhear it now. He's stuck in it forever.
It makes a nice change to be stuck in an accent rather than drop out or change into a slightly different one as I go along. So.
Honestly, I think we should have more TTRPG NPCs in our games that have Valley Girl accents. I think it's underrepresented. I think they're a minority worth hearing out. You know what?
Weirdly,
sure.
Yes, it is not an NPC voice you hear very often, and you're right. We absolutely should have more Valley Girl NPCs.
Imagine you walk into a magic item shop being like, yeah, how much are your greater health potions? I don't know. Why don't you just like check the shelf? Like they all have tags. My God.
I have there's definitely going to be some shopping on my Sunday game, so
yeah, they're like super. This one is labeled kombucha, and this one over here is like a green tea extract. We're doing so well.
It's just
and now nobody wants to play in my games ever again.
Yeah. It's Madison from She-Hulk. That Wongers.
I have yet to see She-Hulk. Honestly, I've heard mixed reviews. Some people love it, some people hate it.
I think
I'll get to it eventually.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
it was fun.
Alas, we are not joined by Damien this week. He has family matters to attend to and not the TV show. But we have the exciting, handsome, otherwise known as Big Daddy, quote, snug, Chris. Hello.
Yeah. Big Snug represent. Yeah.
This is not your first time on Tales from the Tables, right?
I
think you've done it once.
I think before. I did one before, but I can't remember.
Might have been many episodes ago.
We left no impression the last time, so we will try to rectify that.
Yeah.
56 episodes, though, guys. You guys are killing it, right? Like, what an archive.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got a collection.
Yeah, I think I'm on about 20 of them at this point.
I was going to say, I was going to make that joke. I was like, James is about half of them, maybe.
Yeah.
We love you, James. Hey, I've missed a fair few at this point. I was really proud for a while because I think I went like on a almost a 50 episode streak and I hadn't missed one. And then I missed like 2 back to back and it was no, my perfect record of, the episode that we have or the show that we have about 60 listeners for.
I mean, you're my second podcast. So I listen to a comedy podcast as my first choice for work, which is quite a long one, like 2.5 hours. And then you guys are my second listen.
We need to be funnier, James. That's what Chris is saying. We need to be funny. We need better content.
Run, like stadium shows sold out the UK, then great. I'll put you guys first, no problem. They're the biggest Patreon in the UK as well, so no pressure there.
No, so we got goal to aim for, so that's fine.
Yeah, we can't mention the name of the show on this podcast, otherwise we're going to actively lose listeners. They'll be like, "Oh, I'll check it out. That sounds like fun." Sold out stadiums, okay. But alas, we have a couple of things to get started with today. The news is a little light this week. Our typical news gatherer, Damien, obviously not with us. We have a couple of topics that we want to touch on, but then we're going to delve into some just table theory and talking about a couple of different interesting GM perspectives on how to run games, among other things, which used to be something we did more often and have left off in favor of other things. And I'm sure we'll squeeze in a few Tales from the Tables towards the end. But for now, just a couple of quick mentions on the D&D front. We have the Dragon Anthology book coming down the pike relatively soon. July 8th, 2025 is when it's scheduled to drop, and it's called Dragon Delves, a book of 10 dragon-themed adventures. We don't have that much information on it. We know that they're short adventures, so it's an anthology a la Keys from the Golden Vault, which, James, I know you're a huge fan of.
I am.
Or Quest from the Infinite Staircase, or things like that. Or Candlekeep Mysteries, which I think is underrated. I loved those adventures. We do know, obviously, they will feature different types of chromatic or metallic dragons. Sadly, no love for our gem dragon cousins, which we had in FTD. Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. And they go from levels 1 to 12, which will be interesting. Different artists for each of the different adventures. Some of the covers look absolutely wicked. The standard cover is 5 chromatic dragons in their most updated art forms. The Red Dragon got not that much of a visual upgrade, but I think the Black Dragon and the Blue Dragon specifically have changed the most. The Black Dragon's forward-facing horns have now gotten like an extra ridge and kind of have like this back angle to them. They have spines or spikes along the head and neck area. The Blue Dragons, I know Damien and I feel the same way about this. We feel like they got a little lost love. Their horn has become more prominent, but it's been moved closer to the tip of their snout, and they now have similar spikes to the Black Dragon, long and like icicles that run along the head and neck. But those typical like Blue Dragon flares on the side of the head were lost, and we have a much more streamlined, almost White Dragon-esque design.
Do you reckon they were going for like an electric eel sort of look?
You know, I was thinking that exactly. They're probably looking for things that look more like they could move through sand, a little bit more slender, etc. But it just kind of does something to me, even though I only started playing D&D in 4th edition, which we don't talk about. I did go back and play 3.5 a little bit. But it kind of hurts me that they got rid of this iconic design for all the dragons after 50 years. I don't necessarily dislike any of the redesigns apart from maybe the blue, but it just feels a little strange to leave all that behind. There are literally wonderful books in 3.5 and before that of dragon compendiums, like just all the different information about the anatomy, why they look that way, what each purpose each part of the bodies serve. It doesn't look like we're getting that kind of thing in this Dragon Anthology, Dragon Delves, but we are getting adventures, which is really the core bread experience. And of course, if we want more dragons, or we want older dragons, we can just do whatever we want at our tables. And Hasbro can't do anything. Right, Hasbro? Right? Daddy Hasbro?
There's some very cool Blue Dragon art in the PDF I linked, which was
nice.
The Dragons PDF that they sent out when you got the cool rule books on D&D Beyond. And it's like a blue dragon chasing down on a village homestead and 2 people running through, and this lightning wrapped all around it.
Yeah.
I thought that was cool. But yeah, the Blue Dragon, it's kind of more gaunt is maybe the right word for it.
Gaunt, like, yeah. Yeah, I see that.
Needs a bit of feeding, in my opinion.
Well, you know, scant food supply in the desert, if that's even where they still are. But yeah, so that is coming. July 8th is the slated release date, and I'm still looking forward to it. I especially like the alt cover because if you're not seeing it, it's very 80s neon retro style. Yeah, it's even got the same font as like the old school fantasy RPGs of like the 80s and such.
Return to Condor.
Exactly that feel and vibe. Very neon, very awesome. With the gloss treatment, I'm sure it'll look particularly particularly
Yeah,
cool.
I'm trying to work out what will look better with the books that I have already got, and I don't know. It's
Which ones did you get for the core set?
Yeah, so I got the special cover.
You got the limited edition. I like the
Yeah.
limited edition covers. I like my Mind Flayer. He looks cool on my monster manual.
That was the main one I wanted, and then as soon as I decided that I was going to get that, well,
you had to have the others match.
Matching it. So.
I want to know what you guys think is going to come between now and this book, though, because surely we've
got to get something, right?
Like 4 months, because the Monster Manual came out in February, so is it really going to be that long without a book?
I don't think so.
I think so. I think
you think so? You think it's going to be that long?
I think they'd have announced something. I think they're using the Strahd novel that's coming out, which I think does come out in between, because that releases in May on the 13th. So I think
that is great. That was my other piece of news. So there we go. We're done.
Segue into that. Yes, it's now available.
Well covered, James. You nailed it. May 13th, right?
A smooth segue that we've now ruined by bringing attention to it.
Yep.
Yes.
It was so smooth, it couldn't exist.
We couldn't let it lie. Yes, that's coming out on May 13th. So I think maybe that's the middle book. For D&D content in between, and because you can now start pre-ordering it, and I will probably I've got 3 Audible credits that I've just not used because I'm not.
It's called Ravenloft, Heir of Strahd. Actually, do you guys pronounce the H in heir, as in like the scion or something? Or you don't? Okay, well, you do it for herbs, whereas the Americans don't. So we say herbs for some reason. Which sounds bizarre to me. But yes, The Heir of Strahd by Delilah S. Dawson. Here's the back cover pitch. 5 strangers armed with steel and magic awaken in a mist-shrouded land with no memory of how they arrived. Rotrog, a prideful orcish wizard. Shivarian, a sardonic drow barbarian. Alishai, an embittered tiefling paladin. Ka, a skittish Kenku cleric. And Fiel, a sunny human artificer. Sunny is an interesting way to describe. Cover looks pretty cool, and we don't have literally more information than that. So, it looks exciting. We'll find out more, I guess.
Yeah, I do wonder whether, because obviously, if you've spoilers for the Curse of Strahd adventure, ultimately, even if you kill Strahd and escape Barovia, eventually Strahd comes back canonically.
That's right.
So it'll be interesting to see whether they do this as quite a bleak ending where Strahd gets all of them, or knowing that they've got out, but Strahd will be back, and it could be used in future. Future.
Or maybe they just find a way to escape and then don't actually deal with Strahd. I mean, not likely, since he controls whether the mists and the borders of Barovia are open or closed. But maybe, you don't know. They could hitch a ride with the Vistani, something like that. Yeah.
I like the party makeup, though. Other than the Dragonlance books, I can't. I mean, and maybe this is just I don't have the breadth of reading for D&D related stuff, but I haven't read or come across another D&D book that is sort of seemingly they have like a D&D party in mind.
Oh yeah, sure, dude. The Drizzt books.
Okay, yeah, of course.
The Drizzt, because you've got the
I have read
barbarian
those as well.
The rogue.
You just forgot about them. They don't feel like a party. They feel like NPCs now. That's the thing.
Yeah,
right.
I don't know. Those. I know I've said this before, but that particular style of writing, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. There's no real depth to Drizzt, unfortunately, and it's a bit too edgelord for me to enjoy.
Right.
But it's certainly he's like in a party, isn't he? But they're just like Wolfgar and So yeah, it's a little bit weird.
I wonder if from what I remember, the Drizzt books, it's mostly from Drizzt's perspective. So maybe in this, it's one of the things I liked about stuff like Game of Thrones or Wheel of Time or whatever, is that different chapters will have different characters' perspectives, and you'll be inside their head. So I wonder if, as a D&D party, rather than focusing on one main character, they will do it as more sort of like an ensemble thing where they're each chapter, even if the characters are all together, but you see what's going on from different points of view, might be quite cool.
Nice.
That was so when Irvin Welsh, who wrote Trainspotting, all of his books, every chapter's from a different character's point of view. But the more drunk or the more into heroin they are, the worse the chapters read in Scottish. So, like, you come off of one chapter and you can barely understand it, but you're kind of like remembering certain colloquialisms. And then, but eventually you get back round to it again and you're like, oh, thank God for that. So yeah, he does an interesting take on it too, like that.
Amazing. I was actually taking a look at the author of this upcoming Strahd novel. Her name is Delilah S. Dawson. She's mostly known for a lot of Star Wars tie-in fiction, including Galaxy's Edge, Black Spire, and stuff like the novel Star Wars Phasma. She's also written some comic books. She does a series called the Blood series, B-L-U-D, Blood. A lot of credits to her name. A couple of good reviews, New York Times bestseller. So we will see. Kind of excited now that I've read her bio. So we shall find out. I'm a big Strahd fan. I've run that adventure 4 times now, almost 4 to completion. And I'm excited to add more content that books might reveal. I started adding a lot of stuff that appeared in the Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. I went back and I read I, Strahd. My brain melted afterwards from trying to get the two to speak to each other, and the cohesiveness and the canon was all broken because they're very different. But nonetheless, it is a lot of cool lore over 40 years of Strahd, basically. Yeah. Or something along those lines. So, very cool.
I enjoyed I, Strahd, and there was a sequel, War with or War Against Azalin.
I have not read that one, but yeah, I know it's coming down.
But yeah, it's another one of the Dreadlords from another part, so it's also covered in Van Richten's guide, so it's quite a cool overlap there. Yeah, I enjoyed that.
Yeah. I start Curse of Strahd again at the beginning of April, which I'm really
nice. Ooh, are you excited?
Very much so, especially because I've got there was a Kickstarter from, of course, years ago that has now been shipped called Steinhardt's Guide to the Eldritch Hunt, which is
very Bloodborne sounding.
Bloodborne into D&D, so there's a lot of stuff there that I can put into it, which will be a lot.
That sounds like fun. Nice. That sounds like fun. I've talked about this before. I tried to do something different with my latest run of Strahd, which I'm doing for a home group, but it's not a Kickstarter. I think it's available on Dungeon Masters Guild, maybe the other one, Drive Through RPG. But it's called She is the Ancient, which is basically a gender-bent version of Strahd, and it has some really awesome content, most of which I actually opted not to use. I liked the core characters, and I had them all very much developed in my own setting. So I mostly I pulled some ideas and left some others. But in retrospect, after having run it that way, while fascinating and definitely refreshing for me, to run Strahd differently and have different motivations and different interactions with the party, I don't think I'll ever run Strahd as a female again. And the reason I say that is because the true module, unless you're willing to do a lot of work to basically write your own story, the module and the lore of Strahd relies heavily on very Dracula-esque fiction. Mm-hmm. And the main story, which I won't get into the spoilers here, is very similar to Dracula in many respects, especially, in certain interpretations of the Dracula myth. And the fact that the vampire in this sort of canon is meant to represent the predatory, aristocratic male chasing, ineligible or unavailable younger women and abusing his status and power is lost. And that is too impactful to leave behind when running the module as is, I think. So I'm being a little careful with my language here because I don't want people to think that you don't want to run Strahd as a female, you're a chauvinist. On the contrary, I think it's more important to show Strahd as a male because he is more capable of, or you as a DM can be more capable of really driving home that message that vampires are meant to represent douches, are meant to represent like terrible men, especially in that context of like Gothic and eventually Victorian literature, you know. So
yeah, I think the point of Strahd is that to play Strahd is to play an arsehole. And the point of having your players defeat Strahd is to defeat that arsehole. And I think that is very powerful. And I think that comes from his exploitations. And while I think Beth Bard did a fantastic job on She is the Ancient, and I did consider it, I've never run it as that just because of the same reason. So I completely get what you're saying there, Jason.
Yeah. It was interesting. I loved running her differently. She has different motivations and different relationships with the party. And it's not about like a lecherous conquest. It's more about her kind of changing the points of view of the party. They think that she's just a Dark Lord, but actually what she's craving for is her freedom. So there was more of an emphasis on that. But again, a lot of that is lost in translation when you're running the module as is. And if I were to run Strahd more vanilla, I would definitely do it as a male and probably, try to drive home that message too. But to answer your earlier question, Chris, just going back and kicking us out of the Strahd area, I don't actually see anything slated for Dungeons and Dragons between February and July. You're right. I thought that Forgotten Realms player guide was coming earlier. It's not. That's not due until November. So we have the Monster Manual, February 18th release date, so that's already out. Dragon Delves, as mentioned, July 8th. We have the Companion's Compendium. Oh, this is not a D&D thing. This is an advanced. Sorry, I'm looking at a different list. This is a Level Up Advanced 5th Edition stuff. Pets and Companions for your Level Up characters. It does look like we might be getting a companion book to Eberron Rising from the Last War, which is Forge of the Artificer, due for August 19th. Then we have Heroes of the Borderlands, which we've talked about, the new D&D starter set, September 16th. And the Forgotten Realm stuff is due for November 1st, which is the first, 2024/25
that's a double
updated
release,
rules.
right? With the Forgotten Realms.
Yeah, with the Adventurer's Guide or Adventure Guide. Yeah. But neither of these are adventure books. There's just a setting guide and I don't actually think they're coming with adventures.
That's interesting to me, that because they used to do that in years gone past, and it's something that Cobalt Press do, where you have like a player's guide and a DM's guide to the settings.
Right to the settings. Really powerful. That's what that sounds like. Exactly. Yep. So a lot scheduled for the year. None of it between February and July. So there's a long dry period. Time to look into other stuff, other TTRPGs maybe.
Well, talking of other TTRPGs.
Look at that segue that we've now called attention to and ruined again.
The Terraforming Mars TTRPG is fully funded on backer kit yesterday, with 200k being raised in the first day. So it sounds pretty cool, actually. So it would appear that rather than sort of just playing one character, you will play as one character, do a session, and then or two or three, maybe. I suppose it depends how the DM runs it. But then you then play as that character's descendant for the next set of sessions, or the next session, and you see how the impact of your descendants.
So it's generational.
Yeah, so it's generational. So you can see the impact as you start from the first days of Terraforming Mars and then continue to develop it. And that sounds really interesting to me.
That does sound interesting. Yeah,
cool.
Sounds exciting.
I really like that. There's the video game Terraforming Mars is very good, and it's a board game as well. I'm sure there's a lot of Mars themed board games, and they have sort of blended into my brain. But I don't own the board game, but I know that I've got the video game version on PlayStation, and it's very cool. So yeah, I'll be interested to see that when it comes out. It's not news really, but I recently bought and have been reading through the Delta Green handler's guide, and
how's that been?
Honestly, incredible.
Really?
I don't know what's happened, but I've just started watching the X-Files again, and I've got the Delta Green books, and it's all sort of coming together real
You
nice.
don't know what happened, but the 90s nostalgia hit you real hard.
Who knows why with what's going on in the world that could have happened, but yes, 90s nostalgia has hit hard.
Hey James, how's your Buffy rewatch going?
With Michelle Trachtenberg having passed away, I've been thinking about doing that.
Well, it's funny you should mention Chris, because I've started doing that as well.
Well, I can promise you now that, and not a lot of folks know this, but Josh Whedon continued it, but in comic books after the final series.
Yeah, season 8. That's right.
Well, they're coming back and doing another season. They're rebooting it with Sarah Michelle Gellar, I believe, coming back for it.
That's wild. That's crazy.
That's why I started.
Is Joss Whedon still involved in this? I was going to say they've canceled him hardcore, haven't they?
No, but the person
and with good riddance.
The person who is doing it is Chloe Zhao, who is an excellent director.
Oh, cool.
Who did? Oh, was it? Bloody hell! It's gonna really irritate me. Oh, she did the Eternals, but she'd done stuff before that was
Chloe Zhao.
Yeah, and I'm probably one of the few people that adore the Eternals as a Marvel movie. But she did. You
are probably the only one. I think the people in Eternals didn't like Eternals.
You leave them alone.
I do not know. Songs My Brothers Taught Me was her debut film. She's mostly working on independent films.
1,000 Years of Longing, maybe, that she did.
Nomadland and The Rider.
It doesn't say 1,000 Years of Longing. Feature films include The Rider, Nomadland, Eternals, and Hamnet, which is a TBA
maybe it's Nomad.
feature.
Nomadland is fantastic.
She did direct the Saviors Wanted commercial for Diablo 4, which is interesting.
That's
there you go.
A
little nerd tie-in in addition to stuff. Anyway, she's an alum of my place, NYU. All right. Got her MFA. Very cool. So it's been good. You've been enjoying it.
The lore is crazy interesting, and because it sort of lines up with real world history, I do like that sort of like alternate history. One of the reasons I like the World War Z book.
Yes, such a good book.
As sort of the history as it goes through from all the different perspectives from around the world. So it's really cool.
Yes. I thoroughly enjoyed World War Z. I thought it was so well done. That sort of anthological feel of like these different stories of humanity that document like the nature of the war as it progressed over 10 years. So cool.
I'm still mad they've not made an anthology TV series out of it, because it would work.
They really should.
Well.
They should scrap the movie out of existence and make an anthology series. Starting with like the Patient Zero outbreak in I think it was in China. It was.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So the history of it starting from the official like the H.P. Lovecraft Innsmouth book story, starting from there, that being the formation of Delta Green, and then the history through World War II, then Vietnam, the Cold War, and then up through to like 9/11 and everything beyond there. It sort of incorporates all of that, so it's quite.
That's crazy. Is it more? Would you say it's more Eldritch focused, or is it more like supernatural focused?
So it is quite Eldritch focused, but there are plenty of the ability to add more supernatural things in there is certainly there, and I think when I do get around to doing it, that is what I will do. I'll make it more supernatural and not Eldritch straight off the bat. Nice. I suppose what I would do is treat it like the X-Files treats the Alien episodes, where you have monsters of the week and then like a lore-heavy Eldritch thing, and then you weave those together, and then in between then you have one-off like cases.
Right. Yeah. I wonder. So I've played Call of Cthulhu only in one-shots, which is a shame because I'm thoroughly fascinated by the lore and the draw of it, being very much like an investigator, not having a lot of abilities to counter this kind of stuff. Just being caught up in the horror of it all and trying to keep your sanity. But I wonder if there's a market for a modern Cthulhu-esque setting, so Eldritch horror setting, but where you play a more traditional fantasy-esque character. So I'm going to name a really bad movie as sort of the inspiration for this. What was that Vin Diesel movie where he played like that? I think it was called The Last Witch
Hunter.
The Last Witch Hunter. Where it's still a modern setting, but it's two very primeval forces facing off against each other. A la
versus Evil Dead.
Yeah, well, kind of. Yeah, a little bit like that. I was also thinking a la what is it? There Can Be Only One. Highlander.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You could
so
do something
similar
like
to
that with
right?
the pulp settings, I guess.
Yeah,
the pulp settings make you, like you're literally running up and punching Cthulhu in the face, kind
of thing. Honestly, like the thing is, like truly, Call of Cthulhu sounds awesome. Like I do want that kind of experience in a long-term campaign. I like the idea of players and in general your investigators being out of control, in over their heads, out of their element.
Yeah.
But punching Cthulhu in the face every blue moon sounds like a lot of fun. Drop kicking a star spawn as it shows up through the museum doors, being like, ah!
I would say if anybody's kind of interested in Call of Cthulhu, but they don't necessarily want to try and TTRPG, try something like Mansions of Madness as a board game, first of all, because that's much more like accessible as a general rule, because D&D has such a stranglehold on the market.
Yeah,
there is so I forget his surname, but Sandy Pearson. He did write a 5e book, so you can
you can run 5e.
Yeah, he wrote Call of Cthulhu rules for 5e.
Oh wow,
okay.
So there is a book for that.
It's a good probably segue into other things.
If it's a case of accessibility, because everyone knows 5e, so that's there is a little bit of a jump there to make it easier.
Crazy.
But yeah, I think the system for Delta Green's cool. I like the leveling up system. It's not really a leveling up, but every time you fail a particular skill, you put a tick next to it, and then after that adventure is done, you add a D4 to that, because it's a percentile, so it's up to 100.
And you're doing it backwards, right? So you're trying to get a low. You're trying to get a low number.
You want to roll,
and so adding a D4 really messes you up, right?
Yeah. Well, no,
that's actually kind of clever.
So when you fail, you add a tick, and so you can add up to 2 D4s in each skill. So if you fail a skill twice, you can add 2 D4 to your number, which makes it then in the future easier for you to roll on.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Right. To your target number.
So you learn through failure, which is cool. Which also means that when you fail something, provided you survive the encounter, which in Delta Green, as with Call of Cthulhu, it's really rough combat wise. You can die very easily, but if you do survive and make it through, then you do fail upwards, which means that failing doesn't always feel quite as bad as it does with other systems, I think.
Right. Interesting. I wonder if there's, I'm in the realm of theory crafting, and I kind of like this idea. I'm sure it exists. I'm sure someone has thought of it. Is there a Elder Scrolls / Skyrim style TTRPG where you can basically learn any skill by doing that skill? So you know how in Skyrim, to level up your one-handed sword skill, you have to make attacks with one-handed swords. In order to level up your restoration skill, you have to cast restoration magic, and it gets harder and harder and harder the more you do it. So you need more XP in order to continue leveling up and to continue leveling up those skills specifically. In a TTRPG way, I think it's actually quite possible, right? The more you engage with your setting, the more eager you are to roll for certain things, the better you become at them. So for every success, say you're making, let's take 5e as an example, say you're making Arcana checks, but you don't have a great Arcana bonus, and you're starting with maybe a +1, and you roll, say it's 2 successes or 3 successes, and now you're at a +2. And then from then on to get to your +3, you need another 5 successes, then another 10. And, there would be some sort of cap. I don't think you could do it to the Skyrim level 100, right? You'd probably cap it off at 10 or something like that. The dice would have to be different. But I think there's something to be said for that kind of system. I think that could be interesting because then you're never limited to a role. You can basically be as powerful as you want to be, as powerful as the adventure and the DM allows you to be. Basically.
Yeah. So there's one called basic role playing, which is percentile again. And you can do, so you can level up there by succeeding at tests, training, or research. So similar to
similar. Yeah.
So like Skyrim or Fallout, those ones where you kind of have to do set, or you get a skill book or something like that.
The Bethesda bonuses.
So those and basic role playing. Call of Cthulhu's system was born out of basic role playing, so it kind of makes sense a little bit.
Yeah, interesting. Cool. Yeah, just food for thought, thinking about things. I've always liked the Skyrim system, but it serves itself well to a single player experience because you can be good at many things without relying on party members, and that is how those games are meant to be played as solo. So maybe not for a tabletop as much, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like
I like that it
gives
a reason as well to try stuff that you're not that good at, rather than being like, oh well, I don't have that skill, I guess I won't do it. Or always relying on the person who has the high skill to do it. Just be like, do you mind if I have a go? Because if I fail, I can get better at it because I'm
exactly.
Level, so
So
very cool.
So just to touch on that, on basic role playing, I just checked, and there are, so in D&D you have 15, 20 skills, something around
something
there.
like that. Yeah, I think
there are 57 in the original basic role playing list. So and you can try all of them based on 7 stats. So again, very similar to D&D.
Right.
Yeah, I and that's Chaosium habit, and you can get.
Oh, cool! It's a chaos. Yeah, well, it makes sense if that's the Call of Cthulhu sort of originator. Makes sense. Very interesting. But we have other interesting topics to discuss, don't we, Chris?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I figured I'll just come out the gate and say it. Outside
who needs a segue? Overrated.
Outside of TTRPG, I like to watch grown, sweaty men slap at each other. Pro wrestling.
I love this. I love this about you.
I'm a huge professional wrestling fan. In the stairs going up to in my house, I have maybe 20 or 30 different autographed wrestlers there. Been to shows. I absolutely love wrestling, and a lot of my D&D work with NPCs, characters, and storylines comes from wrestling. So
that's awesome. What an inspiration.
They're just so over the top. And
yes,
I find that
I love
really help, especially with NPC work, or if you're playing a one shot or something, it really helps you to create that kind of character. So that's this is my absolute go-to with anything. So the best example I can give you is I recently, maybe 6 months ago, played in a game that Anna run, another Roll Dark DM.
Oh yeah. Why not?
As a brash New York.
I'm kidding.
Guy.
Love you, Anna. She's not
brash New York guy who was a Hexblade warlock. And he would just come up to people. What do we got here? A couple of haters.
A couple of haters. Oh, that's great.
And he would just dumb as a sack of rocks, like great dexterity, great constitution, great charisma, no intelligence, no wisdom, no strength. So point by, fantastic.
I will absolutely admit, well, just to rudely interject in the middle of your story, I will absolutely admit that I've had an NPC that I 100% based off of Bonesaw from the original Spider-Man Sam Raimi film, which is played by Macho Man Randy Savage. It's like, Bonesaw's ready! And I think he said, because they were in a gladiatorial match, and they were like, we don't really have to do this. Like, who's forcing us to be here? And then the guy that they were facing was like, hey, freak shows! I got you for 5 whole minutes of playtime. It was just, he loved it. They were going nuts for it.
I love it. And those over the top characters, and in real life, they're like that too. So there's an Essex boy who's probably one of the best wrestlers at the moment in the world, called Will Ospreay, and he did a promo again when he was coming up against somebody who was talking and talking and talking, and he just went, "Pipe down, bruv." And so,
"Pipe down, bruv."
And so now, on occasion, that putt comes in with an NPC into games and stuff, and yeah, I love it. Anything like that is hook me up. I absolutely. You look at some of these guys now; it's transcending, right? So you've got Logan Paul's a wrestler, right?
Right.
So he was
just
the
nuts.
United States champion. You've got people like Rhea Ripley, who's in games like
I love Rhea Ripley
and Fortnite and stuff. And so these over-the-top characters just make for absolutely phenomenal NPCs. And then the storylines, over-the-top, cringy, I'm going to marry you and blah, blah, blah. And, a wrestling wedding never ends well, by the way.
Is it much like an EastEnders wedding where someone will die or the church will explode?
Yeah, I think the last one I watched, someone came out of the wedding cake in the middle of the ring and DDT'd the groom in the middle of it. Anything like that, I absolutely go to. And even, we were talking about Strahd earlier, there were vampires at one point. There was Gangrel, Edge and Christian with the Brood. So there's all these kinds of guys that, they just, and because they live that character, it gives you some really good ideas about how their feelings are and how they work around it and stuff like that. And as much as I love to be the DM who writes this amazing epic story and there's loads of heroic moments, actually sometimes you just need a bit of comedy relief, and that's where those guys come in, I find.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. A great stand-in for, like, I think a great way to alleviate the tension in an otherwise very heavy campaign or a great story is to have an NPC, and almost always to base it off of some very, very amicable celebrity personality or something like that. I have a recurring Fey Satyr merchant who delves in weird trinkets, who is based 100% on Watto from the Phantom Menace. Who's, "Hey, my friends, how you doing? You want to buy a health potion? Oh, don't worry, I got the norm of direction. You'll never get lost. It always points back to my shop." That very, which I then learned through. And apparently he's a terrible stereotype. And I was like, I didn't know this. I've never met anybody who talks like this. Just this idiot from this episode. So there's that. I've had characters that sound a little like Christopher Walken. Sometimes I had an automaton that had, I think it was a Warforged, who had like a defect in his voice, like modulator. So he took random pauses in places where he shouldn't, and people just, I think, putting a little bit of something recognizable, and like you said, Chris, over the top personalities, especially, just so much fun to mess around with.
Absolutely. And so sometimes wrestling will, give you the over the top simplified downtrodden guy. And so I'll put them in. So my blacksmith that I always go back to, her name is Elmura. She is a Minotaur, and she will just say, "Hi, do you like hammers? Some people like sharp hammers and call them swords, but I know they're hammers." And that's and so Elmura, people love it, and the innocent party members will become friends. And the rogues will try and steal from her, and
of course,
there's a whole thing there, and
that's amazing. That's beautiful. I'm crying because it's so beautiful. For some reason, it reminds me of the dwarf from Dragon Age Origins, enchantment, just like that catchphrase that you get. "To like hammers."
Yeah, I just
brilliant.
Anything over the top and ridiculous, I'll throw it in there. Like you were saying about your Warforged. My Warforged is called Optimus Grime, and he's here to save the planet with the Nautobots.
Amazing.
A lot of the work that I get through Roll Dark and stuff is stag pies. I've got a hen party next week.
Yeah, you do a lot of that.
Stuff like that.
You have to put up with very interesting.
Hold on a minute. This isn't D&D. This is Transformers. What's going on here? It draws them in, and I find that kind of thing is phenomenal.
Yeah. I look forward to the laughter of it. If you're not laughing at a table, then what are you playing D&D for? You have to laugh at some point. Even in the most acted out and serious and epic scope campaigns, you have to laugh a bit. I just really quickly think we should name this episode, and James, back me up here. Pipe Down Bruv should be the name.
Imagine if you could get Will Ospreay to retweet that.
We'll get so many more listeners. They'll expect wrestling talk every episode, so you'll have to come back frequently, Chris.
So tonight on my Friday night game, I have a young girl, and this is for the an autistic game that I run, and she really loves wrestling as well. So her character is just named Ospreay after Will Ospreay.
Nice.
And his nickname is the Goat because Billy Goat. And so she has an eldritch goat called Billy as well.
Billy the Goat. Oh, God.
And then she shared online her design on Hero Forge of Ospreay, which has now been printed and painted. And he liked it, and she got a huge kick out of that. So, maybe, awesome. Who knows?
Yeah. That is incredible. That is so awesome. Gosh. James, you ever put a wrestling personality into your games?
No, I used to watch a lot of wrestling as a kid, and I sort of dropped off. And I think it's just because until recently, where I think it sort of started popping up on Netflix, I didn't have access to watching it.
Pay-per-view.
They were on channels that I didn't have access to, so I dropped off. And realistically, when I did watch it, it was with my cousins because they were super into it. And we would watch for about 20 minutes. I had all the fucking toys. I had this insanely cool like wrestling ring designed for the bar that had like floaties and a trapdoor in the middle.
Wow. That's awesome. Chris is like, can I buy that now?
Sure.
Wedding gifts going on the registry. Looking at yourself, looking where there's room for it.
Like I don't have any wrestling toys, but I do have a lot of I have a mask from a wrestler, a luchador's mask that he sold on Instagram and sent over to me signed, which was cool.
That's awesome.
No
toys.
Yeah, no. I haven't ever put a wrestler in, but there's no reason why I couldn't. I just something I'd never thought of putting in. My worry would be that I'd put a reference to a wrestler, and I'd have a player who was way more into wrestling than I knew.
And then be like, well, that's wrong.
And then I get pulled on it, or they're super into it, and they want to do this like riff that I can't engage in because I don't have the information needed.
Fair.
There was a guy called, and sadly he's passed away recently, Bray Wyatt, who did a lot of supernatural stuff in WWE. So like everywhere, like a modern day Undertaker, basically. So everything goes black. And his fireflies, everyone puts on their camera light in the audience to show.
They're called his fireflies. Oh my God.
And he does like a fun house thing and stuff like this. So if you ever want any really good, like spooky kind of ideas, he's very good. And there's a lot of these cinematic matches where they go to like alternate realms and stuff like that. So there's a lot of high production there for sure. But ultimately, it's all fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. Chris, I feel like you volunteered to be on this episode purely so you could talk about your love of wrestling a little bit more in D&D context.
Put it in there. Like use whatever you can for D&D is what I always say. Always steal from things.
Yeah.
So
100%.
Like wherever you can get an idea for a D&D character doing, and go off the modules. You don't have to have like, we're going to do so. My Sunday group are kind of doing their own personal stories at the moment, but then after that, they're going to be doing Vecna. And I will go off-piste on that all over the place, I'm sure, because it's trope after trope after trope and location after location after location. So there will definitely need to be, they go to Modron for some reason or whatever. And and have those Transformers show up, or have whatever you need there instead. Yeah, absolutely.
It can be a lot of fun. It's the multiverse, you know.
Yeah.
The literally the universe is your oyster. So absolutely. Do whatever you want with it.
So I'm just about to finish Avowed, and those the companions that you play with in Avowed, somebody somewhere will come where they're like a half breed and they've got some kind of fungus growing out of them at some point. Just from that game, that will inevitably come into my game at some point.
That's awesome. Yeah, I get a lot of this, and I've talked about this a couple of times before on the podcast. I get a lot of new experiences by running birthday one-shots for the Wayfinders, which are the teens that I run for. Some of them rapidly not becoming teens anymore, which is concerning after 5 years of playing together. But we handle all kinds of different IPs, especially it's whatever they're into and they really want to see a game about. We'll make a one-shot, which inevitably will turn into a miniature arc. It won't stick to one episode. So I've bought and played video games that I'd never heard of before. I played one called Omori, which is a great indie game about a child's struggle through mental health. Played one much more popular called Disco Elysium, which is another very deep. Yep, I see nods on your sides. Yep.
Yeah, I love it. It's such a good game.
Excellent game. To adapt that into a D&D miniature arc story with starring none other I know you two will appreciate this. Starring Kuno. Kuno doesn't care. Kuno was the main villain of this particular arc. It was a lot of fun, but it was also like we had, the skill trees, the 24 different types of personalities that are talking to you throughout while you're making decisions, but doing that for 7 players rather than 1. It was so much to balance while also thinking of an original story set in an example and doing it online. So you need the maps for it. You can't just do everything theater of mind. You have to have some images and some stuff that I converted into battle maps. It helps that that Disco Elysium was like a top-down perspective mostly, so it was easier to just take screenshots of the location and use them as battle maps, or like
beautiful isometric.
Isometric, yes.
Yeah, beautiful in that.
Gorgeous game overall. Yeah. And I always have something that comes out of those that follows them on their adventures. They're pretty isolated, but it's still canon because these are heroes that are basically breaking the multiverse and shattering reality everywhere they go. So they get something out of it every time that they can take on as like a memento from their adventures for that birthday person. So for Disco Elysium, the character who requested it got the horrific necktie as their sort of thing. So that is, I had to stat it up in 5e and everything. It's basically, it speaks to you all the time, and it can cast suggestion on you with a spell save DC, I think of 15 or something like that, when it wants you to do something particularly crazy, but it can also add a bonus to your rolls if you give in to its demands and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So, but there's also animes we've explored. I got into Chainsaw Man because of a birthday one-shot request. I'm now reading a book series for this. We did Squid Game, and then last year we did Hunger Game. I've gotten into a new musical. Thoroughly obsessed with Epic, which is a concept recording of a musical about the story of the Odyssey and Odysseus. Very modern musical. It's going to be staged. It's going to be its namesake. It's going to be epic. So all this different IP shows you how much you can still have fun with in a TTRPG space. It doesn't have to be D&D. 5e is easy to adapt for, right? Relatively. Yeah. But you can basically make anything into anything. And it's so much fun to try that and to like push the limits and see how would this really work? How would this adapt? I had to do that for Disco Elysium because that's its own tabletop system, right? That's its own dice-based system. And I was like, do I want to convert this to 5e? Do I want to use their system through the online systems that we have? Ultimately, I ended up kind of going with a hybrid. So they would roll d20s, but they would add smaller points, and their skills were replaced by those 24 personality things. It was so much fun, though. So much fun. Anyway, sorry for getting carried away on that, but it's yeah, I feel you, Chris. It's good advice.
Yeah, and I feel like we, like as pro DMs, we're pretty good at this. But I think for a lot of folks, in terms of their players and their characters, and also if they do run a story, like, you don't have to stick to that huge epic fantasy David Gemmell kind of I am the hero, the fellowship, whatever it is. You don't have to run that. You can be, you can literally run a game like Lego Star Wars, he says, looking up his Switch collection. Like, but you don't have to have Xenoblade Chronicles. You could have Zelda or Pokemon League or whatever. All of this stuff is all there. I have a friend who runs a game that runs it like Pokemon Dungeon. So there's all kinds of things that are all doable with it. And don't restrict yourself is what I would say. Don't stay within your box. Make it wacky. Make it as fun as you want, because you're making a story, and it's more fun to have the story than it is to power game, in my opinion.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Yeah.
How many of your stag players agree with that statement, Chris?
You'd be surprised. Like, I had a stag which was all military, and there were two guys who were playing the same character, but they would roll at the start of their turn to see which side of this rat folk rogue they would take. Would it be good rat folk rogue, or would it be crazy rat folk rogue? And they each had a turn on who would do each.
That's funny.
I thought that was quite good.
That is quite good. That's quite cool,
because they were sharing a character. So yeah, I thought that was good. So some of them, but yeah, it's always tricky, I would say.
Right on.
So, do we want to go into Tales from the Tables? I don't actually really have any. I started.
Lies.
I don't have any ongoing games. I started my masters a couple of weeks ago, and in the run up to that, even for my friends, I haven't run anything in a little while. So
wow, well, congrats on starting your masters. What are you doing?
So it's psychology of mental health that I'm studying.
Awesome.
I want to train to be a therapist. So
excellent, man.
So I've started that, and it is terrifying and overwhelming, but very interesting.
Sure.
So, but everything I watch now, so I've started watching Severance, which is to do about memory and splitting personalities and stuff. And so
Severance
weirdly,
is so good.
So good, but weirdly, there's a very big overlap between what I'm studying about stress and memory and the show. So it's really cool to look at that. And I've managed to so far avoid talking about Mickey 17, but that's so rather than a Tale from the Table, I would just recommend people go and see Mickey 17 at the cinema, because it's amazing.
That's your stand-in for your Tales from the Tables.
Yeah, it's my stand-in. Is go see Mickey 17 because it's great. Robert Pattinson is great in it. It's a great sci-fi story, and thinking about the moral and ethical and like implications of the technology they have in it is really cool, as well as sort of looking at what makes a person a person. Is it their memories? Is it their physical body? Because in Mickey 17, the premise is that Robert Pattinson is an expendable, a person that they can 3D print his body, and they just re-upload his memories every time, and they use him for medical experiments. As they travel to another planet, they use him to go and test what solar radiation does to a body, and they just leave him to get radiation sickness on the outside.
Oh, they can re-3D print him, right?
And then they re-3D print him and take his memories and put it back in, and then use him to get the data from the horrible things they do to him. He's treated appallingly, but they're like,
wow.
But they're the reasoning as well. He's not. We're not killing him because he's going to be printed back out tomorrow.
Right.
So it's really cool.
It sounds like a great sci-fi mix of The Prestige and Dollhouse is what I would describe that as. Which I know it's another Joss Whedon show, but I will always sing the praises of Dollhouse because I think it was really ahead of its time for its premise. I think relying on Eliza Dushku to carry that series was maybe a misstep, but it honestly the supporting cast. The supporting cast shone so much that Eliza Dushku didn't really look that bad by comparison. Like, everybody did just such a good job. And
they got canceled at such an annoying point. So
it only lasted 2 seasons. It's so easy to watch, so easy to find, so easy to consume. And it was a really great premise that also is about that. It's about memory. It's about different personalities. It's about people being used as blank slates and having different skill sets and memories uploaded into them. And then about the protagonist who would retain, after each memory wipe, retain a little bit of these former personalities. And it turns out she actually retained all of them and became basically like a person who could do it all. But it was also about the societal implications of this kind of technology and what it would be first viewed as, which was effectively like an escort service for the extremely wealthy, the 1%, right? But then it got interesting. She could also be a master spy or an expert safe breaker or an assassin or a hostage negotiator at one point. They really needed that. And it was just a great concept. And then how that all falls apart because the 1% can't be trusted. And they basically ruined everything, and the corruption went inward into the company itself that ran this service. Really scarily accurate.
Yeah, I was going to say, that doesn't echo today, does it?
That doesn't. Long-reaching implications. Go watch Dollhouse and Mickey 17, apparently. So, yeah.
Who wants to go first with their tail from the table then?
Yeah, sure. I've got one coming up for this Sunday where I've got the previous one, which I think Damien read out for me, was the end of the last arc. So it's the same group, but they've got the end of their second arc, which is this Sunday, which is Marius, who has just made a deal with a green dragon.
Ooh.
His sister is currently undergoing petrification, and they're in Waterdeep. The cleric of Yergil's trying to keep her as long as possible. They're going to go into a church of Baal to find Alderex, the paladin or the anti-paladin, so a paladin killer who killed his mentor and is the one who put his sister under petrification.
Oh, wow. The
anti-paladin. Nice fight, nice and awesome. Easy, but Alderex isn't going to get involved. His minions are going to do it. And then he's going to put them under some kind of spell where they're all in bubbles. And he's going to show the sister dying, essentially, in front of them. And so I'm going to then have... so this is Yagra from Waterdeep Heist, who's the canonically the sister of Marius in our game. And at that point, I'm going to allow Marius to be spoken to by Ilmater, his deity, who's going to tell him that only he has known pain and suffering and love at the same time like this, and he can ascend. And at that point, he will have just a sprinkling of angel dust. He will grow wings and pop out of his bubble and essentially become the one-winged angel. So very Final Fantasy VII reference there. Pop out and have a 1-versus-1 duel against Alderex. And that is the plan, along with a huge monologue that I've written for Alderex when they're in the bubbles. So yeah, and it will give him his starring moment. I'm sure he'll run to Yagra afterwards, and there'll be a message from the cleric to say that she wanted to be sprinkled at this specific point, and that will lead on to the next part of the story. So yeah, that's my tale from the table. Hasn't happened yet, but I know that there'll be some whoops and cheers to it. So I'm looking forward to it.
That's huge. Yeah, mate. Nice. Wow, I don't have anything to follow that. Gosh, I guess I will briefly mention. So a number of games that I run have a recurring NPC called Jenny, who started out. She started out in my very first campaign as a merchant who I realized the players were coming back from having been. Not exactly TPK'd, but from a situation where they just were sorely and soundly defeated. And it was one after another after another. This was Curse of Strahd. And I think they were level 5 at the time or 4. And they were just trudging into town, exhausted and tired. And they were like, we've spent all of our resources. We've barely won any fights since we first got here. Everything has been just one horrible thing after another. And Jenny Greenteeth was this very hag-like entity that had some devious deals, etc. And I had this whole idea for how to run them, but they had just done some hag stuff. And I said, you know what? They need a break. let's scrap the extra hag idea. I've got hags coming out my ears in different places. So let's just make her ridiculous. Let's just have her be a weird merchant who's over the top, who's got a really ridiculous voice, who, when they asked to buy a set of plate armor, she gave them a set of plate armor made from plates. Dinner plates. I found even a picture online of armor done in like a fancy, dish style, and it was amazing. My player never forgave me for that. Love you, Meg, if you're listening. But she then very much got a life of her own, and she became not only just a recurring NPC of very weird proportions, but she basically became the quest giver in a campaign that I wrote about the Feywild. I might have mentioned her a few times here as well, because she's fairly popular. And right now, my players in my Spectarian game, you remember them, James?
I do.
We're still going. Every now and then we have to take a small break, but we're still having it. They have recently reached a city in the Feywild that actually is a human city from the Forgotten Realms, from the Sword Coast specifically, a place called Suzail, which is the capital of the human kingdom of Cormyr, which has teleported there through mysterious means. And they're on the precipice of learning that one of their deities isn't exactly who they say they are. One of the deities that specifically the cleric worships isn't exactly who they say they are. Instead, it's an archfey posing as their deity in order to manipulate events that are happening, that they are doing specifically. So I don't think they listen to the podcast, but if so, we'll see. I haven't said the name of the archfey. But it's also tied in deeply with the lore of the Queen of Air and Darkness, which canonically is the sister of Queen Titania. And the reason that no one can remember her name is what the players are delving into at the moment. The reason that the human city had teleported into the Feywild is the hubris of some of the human archmages of the city, because it's a very magical heavy society, that they had struck a deal with this archfey in order to gain a great amount of power at the cost of the souls of the city. So they're dealing with that. In the interim, I realize that this has now become a recurring plot device, because I'm also, as you know, running a Vecna Eve of Ruin campaign, and I'm running a home game version of that. So I have 2 Vecna games back to back, which is kind of nuts. One on Mondays and one on Tuesdays. And the one on Tuesday, there was a player, an older gentleman player, who made a cleric, specifically a Githzerai cleric, and went looking online for who the god of the Githzerai was, and somehow stumbled onto a homebrew website, which had some mention of a god that was distantly related to the astral plane, which is not even where the Githzerai really make their home. They make their home in limbo, but chalk it up to not so great Google research, but then wrote a lot about how they worship this god of the astral plane, and they renamed all of their spells based on this god. So this god is called Sa, S-A-H, and so bless is not bless, it's Sa's blessing. Guidance is not guidance, it's Sa's inspiration. All kinds of things, like revivify is Sa's mercy, things like that. Very cool stuff.
That's cool.
But as part of my exercise for Vecna, I said, well, because the whole campaign is based around secrets, I need you to develop one minor secret, one major secret, and then I'll develop a secret second major secret from you, which will be revealed throughout the campaign. And they're on the cusp. They've started being drip fed that second major secret, that their god isn't who they think it is. There is no Sa. This is just someone very powerful and important, perhaps even titular in the campaign, that is posing as their god and giving them and letting their faith do the rest of the work. Right. So they're basically, without really realizing it, they're more warlock than they are cleric, and they just don't know it. Because they've effectively they're gaining powers from their pact without having really realized that they've made a pact with something that isn't a god.
Mhm.
So, and slowly this has been drip fed to them for the past several sessions. One knowledgeable NPC said, "There is no Sa. What god do you speak of? Do you mean the body of that one floating in the astral plane that has been dead for several millennia?" Things like that. And so one of the places that, spoilers for Vecna of Ruin, but one of the places that early on that the party goes to is the corpse of a god floating in the astral plane. Guess whose corpse that's going to be?
Probably Ilmater.
Yeah, Illuminator, yeah. Definitely. You've been following the thread.
Yeah. I heard a name, and I have to come back to it.
Yeah. But I need to somehow work more wrestling NPCs into my stories, so that will be my objective this coming week, for sure.
I really want to hear about it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Who do you think? CM Punk?
No, go classic. Go Mick Foley, one of his.
Okay.
Jack or Mankind or Dude Love, or all three, and they're actually the same person.
They're all the same person. Yeah. That actually would be such a meta story. That would be so much fun. Oh gosh.
Like a Nurse Jenny NPC, where they're all slightly different versions of the same
person.
You're in constant contact with Mordenkainen and Tasha, aren't you, through Vecna?
Yeah.
So you could have them having bets on like a wrestling bout or something.
And hey, Earth is canon to the Forgotten Realms, right? That's the whole reason they're called the Forgotten Realms, is because the people of Earth have forgotten about them. But Earth is canon. In fact, this Sunday is it this Sunday? I don't know when it's coming up, but I have a birthday game coming up that has to do with returning to Earth itself. This will be the first time that the teens visit Earth as its actual own planet, where one of their characters had fled to a long time ago, and they wrote up pages and pages and pages of lore about what they were doing there and how they were trying to bridge the gap between both worlds. And that is what the players will discover very soon. So,
nice,
exciting stuff. Maybe we will have bets on wrestling matches and see what happens. Bonesaw's ready. Or what's it? Chris, I have to get your opinion on this before we wrap the episode. What is your take on this far into his career with who turning heel?
John Cena. So the guy that I mentioned earlier who died, Bray Wyatt, he did a scary foreshadowing of this about 10 years ago.
Really?
They did a cinematic match. Bray Wyatt took him into his fun house, and his whole promo was around, the problem is, John, you're not a hero. You're just a scared boy. And the reason you're scared is, what if you have to stop winning?
Whoa.
To me now, I'm watching, I'm like, he bloody did it.
Oh my God.
It's a really lovely thing to watch.
From an outsider's perspective, from a person who's only just kind of dipped his toe into the wrestling world, it's crazy to me that a public figure that has transcended wrestling, that is seen as like a lighthearted comedic in other media, as John Cena, is turned heel and is now expected to be seen as a villain. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's big, right?
But it's the fact that it's been 10 years in the making is also kind of wild. So
yeah, absolutely, long-term storytelling. I will send you that video later.
Please do. That sounds epic. Awesome.
Bray Wyatt is a phenomenal person to watch, and he was The Rock's favorite wrestler as well.
Wow.
So you know that he's good.
There you go. Well, pipe down, bruv. All right. Well,
pipe down, bruv.
Pipe down, bruv. We gotta name the episode that. All right.
We will get it done. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Chris. It's been lovely to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Indeed.
And on that note, goodbye, everyone, and we'll see you next week for another episode of Tales from the Tables.
Indeed. Absolutely. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.